Hi guys, welcome to another video on Abantume. This one is mostly going to be about my process of decolonizing my intellect or my views on knowledge or my views on education. I like learning. I wasn't such a big fan of school, but I like learning and I've always been curious, and even past school I've always been curious and I wanted to learn things, but I didn't really like the way our education system was. The beginning of my education system was in South Africa, and in South Africa there was a heavy, like, you cut the tension between black and whites, even in the 90s, I think, like late 90s. And on top of that, because there's racism and then there's also xenophobia, there was a lot of xenophobia as well, that you would experience growing up. So for me, school wasn't the best place. Like, I didn't really like it that much. But I didn't hate it. I wasn't like one of those kids that hated school. I wasn't excited about it either. I remember when we moved to Denmark, and I really started having a lot of self-confidence, self-esteem issues. Looking back, that's how I see it now. I think back then I was just a teenager and I didn't know how I felt about things. I was entering puberty and all these things, and it was too much. Everything was too much. But then I remember a moment in life where I became so obsessed about being smart and being intelligent. Like, math is not my thing, and it took me a long to accept that. Like, I mean, I don't suck at math, but it frustrated me that I wasn't really good at math. And so I worked really hard to be good at that, and I felt like my intelligence didn't matter until I was good at math. And that mentality, as you can hear, was not a healthy one for me to have. And obviously that's because we live in a society that values people who work with more mathematical, analytical parts of their brain more than people who are creative. And it's funny because those two things are also masculine and feminine. And in a lot of societies, those two things are not balanced either. So there's a high value on what is masculine knowledge and masculine intellect, and a devaluing of feminine intellect. But now, of course, as time has progressed, more people are accepting that people are intelligent in more ways than one. But we had to go through a lot of crap to actually get to that conclusion. And a lot of people, even though that is in their head, it still hasn't gotten the momentum where people value creative people as much as they value people who are highly mathematical or analytical. And to be honest, I feel like everybody's creative. Like, even if you're mathematical, analytical, is it more left brain? I think it's more left brain. You're still a creative person because you're still creating with your brain. Yeah, but what I say about that, like, with people who think from more of that masculine side of the brain, they're very more concrete. They're very more based on rationality. Oh, that's the thing I hated growing up. Logic and rationality, because I always felt like I was illogical and irrational. And I feel like the two things and that's because I was separating my knowledge or my intellect instead of actually combining them and seeing where they met. Like, even though I am highly more feminine intellectual, I think I always thought that didn't mean as much as being masculinely intelligent. If that's even a thing, I think if you follow, you follow, right? And so with decolonization, I've been thinking about how the way African knowledge and African way of passing down knowledge, the fact that maybe we didn't even write down a lot of things, but we passed it through storytelling, through folklore, theater, through dances. We transmitted and translated and gave on our knowledge in a way that, on a Western way, or in the eyes of colonizers, didn't seem very efficient, because their way of thinking was very concrete. And we are more fluid in our way of thinking and our way of seeing the world. And so there's always been this imbalance between the two worlds to understand each other. In that, hey, you guys think like this, nothing wrong with that, but it's wrong when you say that we also have to think like that and value our intellect based on you guys. And I'm not saying that in Africa everybody thinks more from a feminine intellectual side, but I'm saying that our society actually was very more feminine in its connection to the way we saw the world, the way we interpreted our surroundings, the way we did things. We are more of a fluid kind of people, and feminine energy, as you know, is also more fluid. It's not as concrete, it's not as is boxed in. And of course in the world you need both, because they both create the world, right? You need both of them in a way to balance things out. But for me, growing up, I have realized that, especially with the idea, like when I did my master's, and I did it in my master's in science, and when you write your thesis, you have to be very, you know, you cannot be, and then I thought, and then I felt, and that was such a challenge for me. And I was really worried how I would like finish this. And of course, like I've always been diligent with my work and what I do, but that really made me question in the fact that I do not think like that. And the first time in my life, I was okay with not thinking so concrete, and so needing to be so logical, needing to be always so precise, and so rational and so logical, like I say. Because sometimes I talk, the way I talk, I'm more no, you know, and it's also something maybe I've gotten from my heritage, in that we're people of the soul more, and we use our brain, of course. We are people of feelings, and we're people of knowing without having to always say this and this and that. I remember an interesting story where some doctors found out, some Western European doctors went to, I don't know if it was the Amazons, and they had discovered that there was a plant that was really great at healing something, and they had done all this research in the laboratories and all these things, and they have concluded, wow, this medicine is really good for this. And the research was so intense that they were like, so it was such a win for them to find out we can use this plant for this. And then they were in the Amazonas, I think, I don't, it's a long time I heard the story, and the native people knew of this already, and they didn't have any laboratories, didn't have any long, you know, methods, scientific methods, blah blah blah. And then the scientists were really baffled. The European scientists were very baffled, and so they asked them, how did you know that this plant would help against that? And then they say, the plant told us. And they thought that was okay, we can't really use that as anything. We can't write that down in our report, because that makes no sense. That is illogical, irrational. Plants don't talk. And it just really, it was a profound story, because I got that, and I was like, we pay attention differently. Some people have to see and measure and feel. Other people just feel and they know, you know, and the knowledge is communicated differently. And decolonization of my way of knowledge and understanding has meant for me to be open-minded, for me to allow myself to also talk, like when I make my videos with you guys, that I don't always have to be so, you know, because before I was worried. I talk about very tough and delicate issues, and I felt like with my Western brain, I felt like I cannot present that trustfully without doing intense research and being like, this is that, that is that, that is that. And even though I appreciate people who do that, I feel like that wasn't me, and I wanted to talk from a place of what I have learned, of course, what I've read from other people, but what has marinated and how it comes out from me and how I understand it. And for me, that has been really important to know that there's nothing wrong with the way we think. There's nothing wrong with thinking and learning and understanding differently. Not everything has to be so precise, so concrete, so fixed. Some people think more fluidly. Some people talk and express themselves more fluidly, and that is not a sign of less intellect. That is a sign of a different intellect. And if people paid attention to that, they would understand that that is actually enriching in the way we understand the world. And in the case of the natives, like imagine if the European, I don't know, scientists left that feeling like, well, there's another world of understanding, of research, of knowing and learning that doesn't have to happen in a lab, where we're in connection with nature, with our environment, and we listen and we pay attention. Then it talks to us, right? Then it would have enriched that experience. And then there's also my grandmother, who I visited in 2015, in the beginning of 2015, last year. And my grandma is so wise, like she's so wise, and she knows so many things, and she has never lived outside of Uganda. Of course, she came to visit us once, and she didn't really like it here so much. She was like, it's too cold and it's too distant, and I love my country and my people. So she went back home, and I understand her because it's bomb where she comes from. And when she was telling me all these things about plants, about her garden, about medicine, about how she had noticed the change in tomatoes, and all these things like over the years. And her knowledge was so vast, and I couldn't ask her what books did you read, what lectures did you attend, because her knowledge is in her wisdom, in paying attention to her surrounding and listening to her intuition, which is not as logical, which is not as I don't know, as rational, but it's something that we trust nonetheless, because that's the way we operate and we think. And it was such a beautiful thing for me to learn, because it made me trust. Of course, I've learned a lot from the Western education and Western way of viewing intellect, but I'm also learning a lot from my heritage and my ancestry in the knowing of understanding and paying attention and respect to our surroundings. In the Western world, there's a way of observing the world in a way to understand, to decode, to simplify, and they need to kind of objectify experiences and understandings and knowledge. But in other cultures, I'm speaking now mostly of African culture, it's like what we know and what we see is kind of a part of us, you know? At least that's how it was. But the more, of course, westernized we become, the more we're also saying that that is unintelligent to think like that and to talk like that, and people have to be born like that, right? And it's such a pity. Of course, the two can live in balance, just like the masculine and the feminine, but we have to do that in a way of respect to the two worlds. Anyway, so that's this video. I hope it gave you some thoughts to think about, and to also evaluate your own way of looking at your own intellect and your understanding of the world, and how you view your education on understanding the world, because even living is an education. How you decode your living and you interpret your living, which methods you use. Yeah, I hope it does that for you. And yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys. Just leave Black people alone. Just leave us, and that's the least that we're asking for, despite everything. That's all I want. Just leave us alone.